Hi everyone, my name is Carla Dodd. I am a research assistant at the Shallow Water Ecosystems Research Chair at the Nelson Mandela University. I'm actually a geochemist, but this year, under leadership of Prof. Janine Adams, I dipped my toes into the field of ecology, specifically invasive aquatic alien plants in South African estuaries. This also forms the basis of Asipe Ndoto's honours project, which she will hopefully continue in her masters. So what are invasive alien plants? These are non-indigenous species that have been able to overcome significant biogeographical barriers with the unintentional or intentional actions of humans. These species become invasive when they are able to maintain self-replacing populations over a number of life cycles and are able to spread far from the original parent site or plants. Our team is specifically interested in aquatic invasive plant species occurring in South African estuaries, why they are present in the estuaries, why certain species are more invasive than others, and what can be done to control or manage the extent of their occurrence. The National Biodiversity Assessment of 2018 reported a total of 70 invasive plant species, both terrestrial and aquatic, in the estuarine functional zone. In this talk, I will focus on the 5 dominant aquatic species that have been collectively called the Big Bad Five. These species are Pontederia crassipus, previously Icornia crassipus, or commonly known as the water hyacinth, the water lettuce Pistea stratiotus, the caribaweed Sylvania molesta, the red water fern Azolla folliculoides, and parrot's feather Myriophyllum aquaticum. These are all perennial, free-floating, mat-forming species, with the exception of parrot's feather, which is considered a submerged, emergent plant with floating leaves. These plants are all spread rapidly by vegetative reproduction, while the water hyacinth and water lettuce also produce long-lived seeds in addition to the vegetative reproduction, which perhaps explain their success as invaders. The spread of invasive aquatic plants is a global issue, and often the same invasive species are problematic in several countries. The Big Bad Five are widespread globally, where their occurrence is usually limited to warmer latitudes. Although these maps aren't complete, as we know that their distribution in South Africa is far more extensive than what is indicated here, it does give us a good idea of the global distribution of these plants. These macrophytes have all been listed as quarantine pests or placed on the alert list of the European and Mediterranean Plant Protection Organization. In South Africa, they are considered the top 5 most damaging species in freshwater habitats and are listed as Category 1 prohibited weeds that require immediate removal under the Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act of 1983. The optical physicochemical conditions for these macrophytes are variable, but generally the pH is slightly acidic to alkaline. The optimal temperature growth range is between 15 and 37 degrees Celsius. But the red water fern and parrot's feather are also frost tolerant, with the largest overall growth range attributed to the water hyacinth, which can survive temperatures between 1 and 40 degrees Celsius. The most limiting physicochemical parameter is salinity. The Big Bad Five are all oligohaline species, preferring fresh water, which is perhaps why there is a lack of information on the distribution of these plants in estuaries. Prof. Adams and her colleagues published a paper earlier this year reporting 36 invaded South African estuaries, which has since been updated to 45 estuaries. These remain conservative numbers considering that there is little data available, for example along the Wild Coast. The invaded estuaries are distributed throughout all 4 of our biogeographical regions, namely the tropical, subtropical, warm-temperate and cool-temperate areas. They also occur in a variety of estuary types, from estuarine lakes to predominantly open systems. Since these species are oligohaline, as a rule of thumb, if the estuary mouth is open, they will occur in the upper reaches of the estuary whereas if the mouth is closed, they can also occur in the middle or lower reaches of the estuary. Okay, but how did these plants get here to start with? All of these plants have their origin in South America, but have been introduced to South Africa mainly through ornamental and horticultural trade. Because these plants are quite beautiful, they are used for aesthetic purposes in, for example, garden ponds or small dams on golf courses. Since all 5 species can reproduce vegetatively, they are also easily spread by boating and fishing activities. Other methods of transport include rafting on marine litter or hitchhiking with birds, rodents, amphibians, and hippos. Another driver for the occurrence in estuaries is rapid coastal urbanization. This map shows the population density of South Africa, which is overlain with the occurrence of invasive aquatic plants in estuaries. The bigger the dot, the higher the invasion pressure, whether in extent or number of species present. The colors reflect different estuary types. Here we can clearly see that there are clusters of high invasion pressure surrounding the major coastal cities, from west to east, Cape Town, George, Port Elizabeth, East London, and Durban. The estuaries affected by high invasion pressure is mostly fluvially dominated, and therefore have freshwater conditions conducive to the growth of the big bad five. Other estuaries have large catchment areas that act as a source of the invasive plants. Small estuaries can also be prone to invasion as they are more inclined to become eutrophic, and these plants thrive in nutrient-rich waters. Postdoc Monique Noons, in collaboration with Prof. Adams and Dr. Laura van Niekerk, recently published a case study of this in the small invaded estuary Tongati in KwaZulu-Natal. Another concern is climate change, as coastal wetlands and semi-arid areas are especially vulnerable to invasions, driven by nutrient loading and temperature increases, making South African estuaries doubly vulnerable. The Veka and colleagues modelled the distribution range expansion for the Big Bad Five in South Africa and predicts that with global temperature rises, the water hyacinth, red water fern, and Kariba weed will expand their range. The areas most threatened by these expansions are the Western Cape and coastal areas. Coastal urbanization is a powerful driver of invasion, as it often goes hand in hand with deteriorating water quality in the proximal estuaries, specifically regarding nutrient loading. All the infested estuaries have an estuarine health index of C or lower. In other words, they are classified as moderately modified, largely modified, highly degraded, or extremely degraded. The only exceptions are the Corsi and Inyoni estuaries in KwaZulu-Natal, which are considered near-natural with B-index ecological states, and both have low invasion pressures. This could be due to upstream infestations or perhaps indicate deteriorating water quality. The pressures contributing to the deteriorating water quality also cause the freshening of estuaries, meaning that the range of the Big Bad Five expand from previously invaded riverine habitats to the upper reaches of open estuaries and the middle or lower reaches of closed estuaries. These pressures include increased agricultural return flow and wastewater or stormwater runoff. For example, in the Swartkops estuary, water quality is being degraded by stormwater canals such as the Motherwell Canal. The stormwater is a source of excess nitrogen in the system. On the other hand, treated wastewater from the 3 wastewater treatment plants upstream introduce excess phosphorus into the estuary. Other pressures include raw sewage, industrial wastewater from the Swartkops and Uitenhage industrial areas, litter, and sand mining. The floating macrophytes also prefer slow water flow rates, which is facilitated by increased water abstraction and upstream impoundments such as dams and weirs. Often the whole suite of pressures is present in an estuary, causing the system to become fresh and eutrophic. It also causes siltation and hypoxia. Continuing with the Swartkop's example, Dr. Daniel Lemley took these photos at the Perseverance site in the upper reaches of the estuary. As you can see on the 27th of February, a large area of water surface was covered by invasive plants, mostly the water hyacinth. Strong flows in the beginning of March washed a lot of the mats away, and the entire area was clear. Within a week, there were already new mats which probably re-established from upstream infestations. The plants themselves can also cause the further deterioration of water quality and decrease water flow. Dense mats can result in reduced light penetration to the water column, declines in dissolved oxygen, which leads to decreases in the phytoplankton community, and has knock-on effects for other aquatic organisms. For example, the water hyacinth has displaced the native species Zostera capensis, or eelgrass, in the middle or upper reaches of the Swartkops. From a societal point of view, the presence of these dense mats impede water transport and recreational activities, can cause drowning of livestock and humans, and increase water-related diseases such as bilharzia and malaria, as it presents an ideal breeding ground for snails and mosquitoes. The good news is that South Africa has excellent biocontrol programs. For example, here you can see the start of the effects of the leaf-boring weevils on the water hyacinth. The Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries spend about 2 billion rand annually on the control of aquatic invasive plants, of which 42 million rand is spent on the chemical control of the water hyacinth alone. The other 4 species are controlled effectively using purely biological control, but the management of the water hyacinth is dependent on water quality, especially nutrients, temperatures, and herbicide application. This is a framework formulated by Novoa et al. In 2020 and which we have adapted to the Big Bad 5. It summarizes the common pathways of introduction, the species traits that make them successful invaders, the environmental conditions of the recipient ecosystem, the impacts they have on the environment, and the management actions that can be implemented for effective control. In a nutshell, what makes these species successful invaders is the fact that they are introduced in an area where initially there are no natural enemies. They spread rapidly by vegetative reproduction and can be dispersed effectively by humans, animals, wind, and water. The water lettuce and water hyacinth also produce long-lived seeds that make them especially successful invaders in South Africa compared to the other 3 species of the Big Bad 5. Furthermore, they all have broad environmental tolerance ranges. Although these species can be effectively controlled by biochemical control, it is necessary to address the root cause for their occurrence, most importantly, nutrient loading. If the water quality of our estuaries isn't improved and the Big Bad 5 are removed, it will result in an open niche that can be occupied by submerged invasive plant species and can cause alterations between invasions by the submerged species and the free-floating invasive species. What is the way forward? So far, the distribution of invasive aquatic alien plants in South Africa's estuaries have been recorded based on information from literature that mention occurrences, the Botanical Database of Southern Africa, as well as iSpot and our naturalist observations. Systematic monitoring of estuaries is now necessary to record the occurrence of invasions. Monitoring could be focused on high-risk estuaries, which includes estuaries with ecological states of sea and lower, in proximity to towns and cities, and estuaries connected to disturbed invaded catchments or inter-basin transfer schemes. It's also important that the physicochemistry of infested waters are measured to inform the predictive modeling of spread. The early detection of invasions will be crucial for the impact on the estuarine ecosystems. Thank you all for listening or watching, and check out our team's social media pages for any future research updates.